This video is the ultimate guide that will help you ace the IGCSE Chemistry 0620 Paper 4 exam and make sure that you get the A star by the end of it. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, tip number 1 is all about the color test sheet. So in Paper 4, you'll often get questions in chemistry asking you what color a compound changes to in a beaker once another compound is added. Let's say it's NaCl and OH minus ions that are added, hydroxide ions that are added. What sort of color does the final compound produce? These questions are really common in paper 4 and often they account for about 3 to 4 marks depending on the question type. So usually you will see questions like describe what color changes occur in the beaker, what final compound finds, and include a reaction, a balanced chemical equation or reaction to complement your answer. This question is usually about 3 or 4 marks. So make sure you guys are really understanding and memorizing those color sheet patterns. And to do this, I highly recommend using the color sheet attached either in the link in the description below. I'll leave it in the description. And it's also available in paper 6 itself. So if you go to your past paper website, let's say go to the Cambridge official website and look up a paper 6 exam. Look for the mark schemes of those paper 6 chemistry 0620 exams. What you will see is actually that there is a full guide on what colors are produced for certain compounds at the very end of the mark scheme. So keep scrolling down the mark scheme and what you'll see is a sheet with all of the colors in a tabular form where you have the compound and you have the color produced once it's mixed with a different compound. Make sure you guys print this sheet out and put it in front of you. Maybe put it in front of your desk, in the bathroom where you go every day and you see it in your vision, right? Make sure it's very clear that you are able to understand and memorize it. So print it out, keep it in your vision and make sure that you really use this particular sheet to memorize the color patterns. Tip number 2 is all about concept clarity. I will say this again and again. Concept clarity is so important and a lot of students misunderstand it because I think many students believe that concept clarity is just about understanding a concept, memorizing a bunch of tables and yeah, you're good, you're done. That is not the case, alright? Concept clarity is all about connecting different topics within your chapter. So making sure you can connect different ideas and different concepts to each other, link them to each other to form a cohesive and a coherent, proper detailed response in the exam. Alright, so make sure you are consistently doing things like mind mapping, connecting different topics through whiteboards. If you guys want an example of this, I have an entire video on mind mapping and making whiteboard summaries, which I'll link over here. It's also called the walking method, which we'll go to a little bit more detail in the video. But make sure you're connecting topics through mind mapping and making those whiteboard diagrams and linking them through arrows as well to understand what are the relations between this topic. How does this topic relate to the other topic and what is significant in this topic that will help me understand another significant portion of the other topic. Because like you see here in this question, often exam questions will ask you to take knowledge from many different parts of the syllabus. So make sure that you make a mind map like this. Again, I'll give you guys an example here. This is what I used to do for IGCSE chemistry. I would make a mind map of all of the key reactions and the key chemical equations, especially for organic chemistry. It's really good to make a mind map like this to understand how organic chemistry is. Some parts of organic chemistry like stoichiometry, how they relate to other parts of organic chemistry like reactions and other sections like balancing, acid-base reactions, things like that. Alright, tip number 3 is step marks and showing your working art. Y'all, I did not think this was significant for chemistry. I thought this was only a thing for maths and extended maths, add maths, things like that, right? But actually it's super important in chemistry that you show your working art, especially for organic chemistry and stoichiometry. For instance, if you look at a question like this where it's 2 to 3 marks that asks you to balance out a chemical equation, make sure you actually write the steps of how you delegated the coefficient. So balance one side of the equation and then balance the other side of the equation. So always do the left side first. I always recommend doing water especially is a really common compound that you'll see on either the left or the right side of the equation. So balance the water or the main compounds first and then go to more nitty-gritty compounds like Na or Cl or things like that, where even if it's like a half compound, if you have to balance with like 3.5s, 0.5s, 1.5s, do whole numbers first before you go into decimals. you need to have 2 to 3 fully balanced chemical equations. Essentially, make sure that in acid-base questions you are splitting up those chemical reactions. So you have your acid chemical reaction equation, balanced equation, 1 mark. Your base chemical equation, balanced, 1 mark. And your final redox reaction where you combine both of those equations together and formulate a single balanced chemical equation is your 3rd mark. And lastly, the 4th mark is surprising. It is for significant figures. Usually that's in organic chemistry, but in balancing it's making sure that you have balanced it to whole numbers. Now I know that in some cases they might accept half numbers and decimals, but I always recommend to balance to whole numbers. So if you have numbers like 3.5, 2.5, make sure you double them. So 2.5 goes to 5. Make sure you're making each of the coefficients into a whole number and write that as your final answer. Moving on to tip number 4, command terms. They are as important in IGCSE chemistry as they are in IGCSE biology, which if you guys want, I have a bunch of my IGCSE biology videos linked in the description below. But essentially, command terms are all about the starting term of a question. If you look at a past paper, open up any question, you will always see a command term at the very beginning of the question, and this usually includes stuff like state, describe, explain, justify. These terms are called command terms. And the reason why they're important is because they give you an indication of how you should answer the question to get full marks. So here's a rundown of every single command term that usually comes up in IGCSE chemistry and what each of them mean. Starting off with describe. Describe is probably the most common command term alongside explain that you'll see in IGCSE Chem. Describe means to go into a little bit of detail. Usually that includes a definition and one more sentence. Only one more sentence, and that's important because describe is less detailed than an explain question. So describe only includes a definition and 1 or 2 more sentences at max. Explain questions on the other hand are more detailed. They give really, high level insight into the concept that you're explaining in your answer. Explain questions are all about going into depth about how and why something occurs. So whenever you see an explain question, I want the question of why and how to pop up in your head. Always include both of these sections, why the concept occurs the way it does and how the concept, what is the process behind certain things happening, like what is the process behind the manufacturing of iron, for instance, or Fe, right? Make sure you go into as much detail as possible with any explain question. Another really common example you see is justify. So justify is about weighing the pros and the cons of a concept. So making sure you mention the advantages and the disadvantages based on the number of marks. So if it is a 4-mark question, what I would do is I would do 3 advantages and 1 disadvantage. Or let's say I would do 1 advantage and 3 disadvantages. Make sure you do in uneven proportion of advantages and disadvantages. Do not do 2 and 2 because often that will make sure you do not have a conclusive response to justifying your answer. So always do an uneven proportion. And at the end of your answer, make sure you do a single statement that conclusively says yes or no. Okay, so yes, I agree to this because the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, or no, I do not agree to this because the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. And lastly, tip number 5, which is arguably the most important and the best tip for chemistry, is to round your final answer to the number of significant figures mentioned in the question. So what does this look like in an actual example? Let's say the question says you have 2.18 grams of sodium which was added to a beaker containing 3.15 grams of chlorine solution. Write the balanced chemical equation and find the moles of the final product formed. Firstly, what you need to do is write the equation and make sure you do it so that it systematically looks like you're actually showing you're working out. So make sure you do the first left side of the equation. Firstly, look at the left side of the equation and look at the easiest compound to balance. Usually the easiest compound to balance is water, so make sure you're balancing that first. This also goes for balancing charges, especially in electrochemistry questions. Usually compounds like water or compounds like NaCl, actually properly formed compounds, have a charge of 0, so they are neutral, so keep that in mind. With organic chemistry, when we looked at the question earlier, Since it's 2 decimal places or 3 significant figures, like with 3.15 grams of chlorine solution, your final answer needs to be rounded to 3 significant figures. Now it's important to mention you need to look at significant figures and not exactly decimal places. So always make sure you're rounding to the right number of significant figures and not exactly decimal places. Yes, decimal places are important, but the examiners will make sure to look at your number of significant figures first. So that's what's going to get you the mark. So always round to the number of significant figures mentioned in the question. And that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, do make sure to like, share and subscribe to Biolog. If you guys have any other suggestions for future video ideas, please let me know in the comment section down below. I am always looking at your comments and liking them. So if you guys want me to do videos like IGCSE business, IGCSE physics or mathematics or any other subjects for that matter, please let me know in the comment section down below. Make sure you guys subscribe to Biolog because I have a huge number of amazing videos coming for you guys which are going to be super useful for your IGCSEs in the May-June season and even any other general exams that you've got. And I wish you guys all the very best for any upcoming IGCSE exams. With that, I'll see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.